Collabs. We all know some good ones, right? Like Jordan and Pippen, Kobe and Shaq, the CIA and Crack, or Gary Webb and Two Bullets to the Back of the Head. Well, what if I told you that none of those duos have nothing on what the new group Kaytramine has brought to the table? That's right, it's even better than Tylenol and raw chicken breast, which is why for today's video, I want to talk about the new collab album Kaytramine and see how this holds up in comparison to previous collabs that have dropped in the past couple of years. So for both of these artists to come off a few years of hiatus, with Kaytranada's latest project being in 2019 and Amine's being in 2021, it's pretty interesting to see these two come together out of nowhere with their new name Kaytramine and self-titled album, with them being the frontrunners for a fresh hip-hop sound for the summer. But I guess apparently Amine had a long-held appreciation for the veteran producer, messaging him back in 2017 to show love, with the hopes that one day a project like this would come into fruition. But now flash forward to today and the project finally dropping, I gotta say that this was very much worth the wait. From the production side to the features to Amine himself, it all came together pretty nicely to make for some bangers that'll stay in my rotation for a long while. But of course, before we get into the other aspects of this project, we have to talk about Amine himself, this time giving this more braggadocious or confident flow and delivery within his bars, with some pretty racy and raunchy lines tossed in between catchy choruses that make for some comically good bops, for a lack of better words. I mean, even when getting into Amine's bars, he's definitely pretty heavy on the punchlines on some of these tracks, with lines such as "just popped an X, now I feel like I'm Malcolm," or "Shawty said nut on me so I bust out the troops," or even hating on a nigga like her name was Rachel Nichols. And while there were many others I could get into, for the majority I could just sum it up with him balancing between racy and edgy within every other bar. But even still, he definitely has some moments in which he shines very brightly, such as on the tracks and Salsa Up, that definitely make for some of my favorites on this entire project.
Call on Astro Black whenever and I'll come bless the cat.
But as for the production, I feel like for the majority, it was more of Kaytranada bending to Amine's sound instead of vice versa, although don't get me wrong, we still got some fire Kaytranada production with the tracks Let's Talk About It or Forever. But although I could see this change in his production style as a negative, instead I'll look at this a bit more lightly and honestly appreciate how he was able to complement Amine so well for a lot of these tracks. From the little vocal loops to sprinkles of synths tossed in between some heavy 808s, Kaytranada was really able to stand up and stand out even a little further than what he's used to doing before. I think a good example of this would be on the track STFU3, which relies more on the bass line and small vocal samples tossed in between to make for this more skeletal instrumental, sounding like something more out of this world, like if Zachary Lubin made hip-hop beats, you know? But there's also the track that also has a pretty different beat, with Kaytranada tossing in some heavier 808s to carry the rhythm, with the more monotone synth loops rolling in the background to make for an absolute banger of an instrumental. But aside from that, as for the mixing, for the most part, it was okay. There were some moments in which Amine's vocals seemed a bit off, especially on the track Salsa Up, in which he sounded really scratchy and muffled, which kinda threw me off, but the song still worked regardless, so I wouldn't say it's that much of an issue. But then there are the features, which for the most part definitely didn't disappoint, with Freddie Gibbs, Big Sean, and Amare standing out the most in this album. But I think my favorite would probably have to be Big Sean on Master P, giving us his usual mixture of equally corny yet hard bars, saying shit such as "niggas in they bubble and they still ain't poppin'," which gave me a stank face, I won't lie. But as for Freddie and Amare, they definitely held their own weight, seeming to take over the entire song the moment they hop on the mic. But as for the others, there was Pharrell and Snoop Dogg here as well, but if I'm being honest, both of them were pretty underwhelming, especially Snoop Dogg on I, given less of what seems to be a verse and more of what seems to be nonsensical rambling, while Pharrell only did some backing vocals and a small chorus on Forever that didn't really wow me. But overall, this album was honestly pretty good and a nice way to lead us into the summer. Kaytranada's production was amazing and Amine's rapping didn't disappoint either, so to put this on a scale, I'm giving this album a low 8 out of 10, being something that I feel all of you should check out. But how do you guys feel about the first Kaytramine collab? What would you rate it? Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe, and follow my IG and Twitter, and follow Chocolate on Instagram for more illustrations. And on that note, I'll see you guys next time when I try to DM Kaytranada to hop on a video. Peace.
I got a slightly modified Geo Metro. This thing's got 3 speeds. Here, there, and gone. It's got the power of infinity and beyond.